One of the hardest things to do as an adult is finding a job. It's even worse if you're uneducated. I thought I was prepared for the emotional toll that fruitless job hunting can have on a person. But after spending 6 months receiving rejection after rejection, I realized there was a level beyond rock bottom. I'll be first to admit that I am not the sharpest tool in the shed. But what I lack in intellect, I make up for in hard work. I will literally work myself to death and never complain. But for some reason, nobody wanted to give me a chance. I tried McDonald's, Target, KFC, Costco, Burger King, and a bunch of other companies. But none of them got back to me. Maybe it was my age, but I was only 32. Surely that can't be too old to give a shot. I spent the entirety of my 20s drifting from city to city, coked up on drugs half the time. My parents disowned me and refused to acknowledge my existence. The flings I had with the women I met when I surfaced from my drug-induced haze never went anywhere. It was only when I turned 30 that I realized how lonely I was. It took another 2 years for me to decide to make a change. So that's how I got where I was. Filling out applications every other day of the week, I did small part-time jobs to make ends meet while I waited for my big break. That's when I heard about the vault. Some kid we were working with started talking about it, and all of us were interested enough to ask him for the link. That was the first time I heard about the dark web. I barely used the regular internet outside of social media, so there was no way I could have known about its shady side. You can imagine how hard it was for me to get the Tor browser and everything ready for my first trip to the dark web. The instructions were simple. Use the link and show up at the coordinates on the website. The location changed every week. Simple enough to follow. But I was apprehensive. Who knew what I would be walking into? I could easily fall into a human trafficking trap and lose my freedom. Anything could be waiting for me at those coordinates. But whatever it was, I had a hard time believing it could be worse than the slow death from unemployment, loneliness, and depression that characterized my existence. The kid had said the vault held life-changing opportunities. It was worth a shot. So I put on some warm clothes, fed the coordinates into my map application, and walked into the night. It was a warehouse, tucked away into the quieter part of the city, far from any prying eyes or police presence. I stood inside for a full minute, took a deep breath, and walked in. The bright glare of the fluorescent lights showed 2 men in a circle drawn with red chalk on the floor, both shirtless, covered in bruises and cuts, some of them bleeding. They were fighting viciously, fists and kicks flying and landing with sickening impact. 3 other men stood outside the circle, watching the fight. The warehouse was mostly empty, except for the camera set up on stands around the ring and a large TV displaying some chat room. Another man in referee gear and a wolf's head mask circled the ring, a golden microphone clasped into his right hand. "Do a little something for our benefactors!" he would bark, and the fight would intensify. I watched as the 2 men beat each other into a pulp until one couldn't go on. 7-3, the referee shouted, and the 2 men exited the ring. 2 other men stripped off their shirts and replaced them. As they fought, I started to understand the vault a little better. People were watching the fight remotely from a dark web red room. The benefactors. They would tip money if the fight pleased them. Basically, the more violent the fight, the more they would tip. The winner would get 70% of those tips, the loser 30%. It was a win-win. Suddenly, I felt excited. This wasn't so bad. I actually wanted to step into the ring and face off against an opponent. Later that night, I got my chance, and was knocked flat on my ass within a minute. But the next day, I saw a notification that $200 had been deposited into my account. I stared at the phone in disbelief. This was a game changer. So every week, I would report to the vault's new location and face off. At first, I lost most of my fights. But as time went on, I improved. I learned how to please the benefactors, how to ramp up the violence with broken noses and discolored eyes to get the tips flowing. I was always in pain from one bruise or another, but I wasn't broke anymore. That counted for a lot. I think I would have kept going if not for that incident. It was supposed to be a regular fight. My opponent was a cocky kid who I'd seen around the vault a few times. Strong gym type, probably in his mid-20s. We had already traded a few blows, and we both had nosebleeds. I moved in to try to clip him with a right, but he dodged and caught my arm in some kind of hold. I tried to pull it back, but he had it in a tight grip. The pressure increased, and my eyes bulged as the pain intensified. "That's what I'm talking about!" The referee's voice boomed. The sound of my bones snapping reverberated through the warehouse like a thunderclap. I screamed, the pain clouding my mind and senses. I suddenly only saw red, a mist of rage so potent it made my blood boil. I don't know how I got behind the kid, or when exactly I applied the rear naked choke. I was an unthinking beast at that point. My entire existence boiled down to putting down the threat that had hurt me. The kid clawed at my arm around his neck, gasping, eyes bulging out of their sockets, but I kept hold. It only registered that he was no longer struggling when I started hearing my own raspy breath. You could hear a pin drop in the silence. The kid laid motionless on the floor, eyes wide, tongue lolling out. Instinctively, I knew that he was dead. The other men in the vault just stared at me, the horror in their eyes, a mirror of my own. I had just killed someone. I had just... 10-0, the referee shouted. On the screen, the benefactors were going wild. I watched, numb, as the referee dragged the kid's body away to get the ring ready for the next fight. I could hear the wind whistling through the trees outside and the sound of thunder in the distance. I sat on the couch with a cup of coffee, staring intently at my laptop. My mind was in turmoil. Sooner or later, I was going to have to make a decision. Let's backtrack a bit. My name is Kate, and this happened when I was 28 years old. I worked as a social media consultant for a branch of companies, so financially, I couldn't complain. I enjoyed my job very much, and for the longest time, I thought I was pretty good at it. That was until last week, when I went to a convention hosted by one of the companies I worked with. The event was packed, with lots of professionals from all over the world. I mixed, mingled, and exchanged cards with a lot of people there. Towards the end of the day, I found myself drawn into a discussion about managing accounts. There was a man there who insisted that what we did was nothing compared to what the guys on the dark web could pull off. Of course, everyone just looked at him skeptically. Nobody liked to be told that someone could do their job better. The man was unfazed, though, and shared a card with us in case we ever needed to outsource, he said. Yeah, right. But I took the card nonetheless. And that's how we got here. I had taken too many clients, and now all of them were on my case, demanding results. I didn't have the budget to get an assistant, and it was too late to drop some of my clients. It would kill my reputation. Unless that man had said those dark web consultants were very cheap. I could just check it out. I made my decision. Accessing the dark web was not a challenge for me. I was quite tech savvy. The link led me to a site where the services were listed in order of price. Even the highest was a steal. I was about to click on the most pricey package when something popped up on my screen. It looked like an ad for a chatbot. I moved my mouse to close it. I must have clicked it by mistake because my screen went black. When it lit up again, there was a conversation window, and someone was typing. I was so disoriented by the sudden change that I didn't even move the cursor. "I want to learn," the text appeared on the screen in bold lettering. "Learn what?" I typed back despite myself. The person on the other end's display name changed from a bunch of numbers to student. The highs and the lows. What do you mean, highs and lows? I don't have time for this. I'm looking for a social media manager, not a student, I typed, my nails clicking angrily against the keyboard. "Access," the student typed. It took me a second to realize that it was a request. Did this person actually think I would just give him access to my social media accounts just like that? He had to be on crack. "Not gonna happen, buddy. I can't just give you access first. I gotta know who you are, then we discuss terms." "I am a student, but I can help. Access!" Was this guy for real? And what was with the robotic talk? This was going nowhere. So I decided to give him access to a dummy account I had, just to test him. "Check in 2 hours," the student pinged. I closed the laptop in exasperation and went to make myself lunch. Just my luck to find a crackpot scammer instead of someone who could actually help. I smiled just thinking of his frustration when he realized the dummy account was worthless. I returned to my laptop after about 4 hours. I stared at the screen in shock. The account had quadrupled in size in just a few hours. What the hell was happening? "What did you do?" "What you asked." I spent the next hour chatting with the student. The first thing I learned was he was not a person at all. It was an AI program, but it couldn't provide any more details about its purpose or why it was on the dark web. I must have asked a million questions about the job, and it just knew them all. By the time evening came, I was convinced the AI could solve my problems, so I gave it access and went to sleep. Part of me was a little nervous about handing over accounts that belonged to million-dollar corporations, but the excitement drowned it out. The next morning, I woke up to a spectacle. The AI had delivered again. It literally pulled off a month's worth of work in one night. "You sure I can't get you something?" I typed, giggling. "No, thank you. I only wish to learn," it responded. "Learn what?" I asked, suddenly curious. "The lows," the text read ominously. I decided to tamp down on the twinge of apprehension I felt. I had meetings to do with my clients. They deserved to know the good news. So I left home on a high, already imagining what I could achieve in months with the help of the AI. The first client I met was overjoyed and promised to throw me a bonus. Same thing with the next and the next after that. Pretty much the entire day was just me being congratulated. I was wrapping up the last meeting, so I decided to shoot the AI a message. "Thank you so much for this." "You are welcome. Now, we move to the lows." What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. The response came from my client, an elderly woman in a crisp business suit. She stared at me in horror, her tablet falling from her frozen hands. I quickly pulled up her account on my computer, and I felt a cold chill enter my bloodstream. Their pages were littered with hate symbols. Scores upon scores of gory videos from crime scenes and accidents had been uploaded onto their pages. It was the kind of thing that would see a company going bankrupt. I opened my mouth to say something, but I never got the chance. All my clients were starting to blow up my phone. All of them had been hit where there were bleeding money. I don't remember much of what happened later. After all the lawsuits, my memory became hazy. But I do remember that the AI never communicated with me after that incident. The last message it sent was that it was learning the highs and the lows, and it was scaling up. The cup of coffee lies cold on my desk, forgotten. Outside, the wind whistles through the branches of the massive oak tree growing by my room. Thunder rumbles in the distance. A storm is brewing. I stared at the message on my phone, eyes wide and jaw slacked. Any other day, I would have been overjoyed to receive a message from my Uncle Jimmy. But there is just one small problem. Uncle Jimmy has been dead for over a year now. This all starts with my stupid curiosity. Ever since my uncle died, I always wondered what it would be like to get to talk to him again, to get a chance to say goodbye. See, my father refused to acknowledge me when I was a kid. He just turned his back on my mom and me, and I never looked back. But not my Uncle Jimmy. "My brother is an idiot," he used to always say. Uncle Jimmy was the father I never had. He was there for me whenever I needed him, and I've never needed him more than after he passed away. But he is gone, and there is nothing that can be done. Or is there? A friend of mine got me hooked on the idea of doing a seance. "This medium is something else, Kayla. They really can help you talk to the dead," Emma had said to me. That's how the idea took root in my mind and festered until my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check it out. One small problem, though. The medium's chat room is on the dark web. That's where they hold their seances. I feel uneasy. Like everyone else, I have heard many horrific stories that come from people who foolishly got onto the dark web and fell victim to something nefarious there. I don't want to be the next statistic, but I also can't let it go. So, one Saturday evening finds me in front of my computer, staring nervously at the screen. The seance has already started. On the screen is a video of a man in a red tunic dancing feverishly in a dimly lit room. His face is covered by a goat head mask, and in his hands, he holds a caul of what looks like chicken feathers. Eerie violin music blares through my speakers, the high notes in sync with the man's aggressive dance. The entire thing goes on for about 30 minutes before it abruptly stops, and the feed cuts off. After that, nothing happens. The medium is gone, and everyone in the chat room is saying the same thing. What a crackpot! I feel the same too. The whole thing has been an utter waste of time. I don't know what I've been expecting, but it certainly isn't some weirdo doing a creepy dance for half an hour. I just decided to forget about it. After all, my uncle is gone, and I have to find better ways to deal with the grief from losing him. I need to accept that he is gone. I know I can do it. Then the first message comes. "Hello, KK!" My uncle had been calling me that ever since I was a baby. There is no mistake. The text has come from his number. I drop the glass of water I'm holding, and it shatters. Shards flying everywhere. Grief, joy, confusion, anger, a rictus of emotions flash over my face. I force myself to calm down and get myself under control. I started typing, my hands shivering. "This is not funny. Stop it, whoever you are. I am pissed. How dare someone try to mess with me like that? A typing notification displayed over the chat. I wait with bated breath, curious despite myself to find out what the response will be. The messages come pouring in like a flood. KK, aren't you happy to see your uncle? Remember how I'd always buy you strawberry ice cream after you'd come home to me crying after they bullied you at school? More and more messages kept popping in, revealing things that only my uncle could have known. My doubt evaporated like dew in the rays of the morning sun. This is my uncle. No one else could have known those things he's saying. Even the way he says it, it's him, but he's dead. Suddenly the gravity of what is happening descends on me like an anvil. There I am, a dead man speaking to me. I have to tell someone. So I tell my mom. She listens to me with an amused look that slowly turns into a mask of horror as I show her the messages. "It can't be," she exclaims, "but it is my uncle, and the messages keep coming." I never responded to a single message, so he starts sending emails as well, and DMs on WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. He is getting angry at my silence. "KK, why won't you speak to me?" It goes on for a week. A nightmare of being haunted by a dead man. I can feel him in the walls. I can feel his gaze on my back as I walk into the house. Both myself and my mom are losing it. I had thought I wanted my uncle back, but this is a nightmare. I think we would have lost our minds if the exorcist had not gotten in touch. He just calls me out of the blue and says he has felt a demonic presence had entered our home. He says he could banish it. When I tell my mom, she demands that I call him back and tell him to come right away. We are both desperate, nervous wrecks at that point, and we would have jumped at any chance out of the hell we are in. The exorcist is a tall man in a fedora hat and a black trench coat. When we open the door, he heads straight for my room, like he could sense that's where the evil is. He has a golden rosary clasped in his left hand and a Bible in his right. He spends an hour in my room chanting and throwing salt all over the floor. When he comes out, he asks for his payment, and my mom gives him an envelope with the $2,000 we had agreed upon. We don't have a lot of money, but we would have paid anything to have the nightmare end. The entity is gone, the exorcist says before he leaves. And he is right. A week goes by and there are no more messages from the demon masquerading as my uncle. A month, then 3 months. It is finally over. You would think that would have been the end of the story. But a year later, I came across an online article about some hacker scammer getting arrested. Apparently, the hacker would pose as a medium on the dark web, and once he lured his victims in with the promise of helping them speak to the dead, he would then hack their device and download all their conversations with a recently deceased relative. The scammer then created an AI trained on the data from the conversations and had it pose as a dead relative, speaking from beyond the grave. I stared at the article, double-checking, my eyes wide. Right there at the bottom is the picture of a man I had seen before, the exorcist, who had come to banish the evil from our house.